All right, good afternoon, folks. We're just gonna give folks one more minute to kind of join in, and then we'll get the session kicked off. Thank you for joining us today. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar today. This is our June Race and Education webinar focused on high quality and innovative pathways. We're really excited for this conversation today as we have a dynamic panel that is going to bring a lot of perspective and resources to the table to really help us figure out these issues. The Hunt Institute is committed to having honest conversations about issues of race and culture that are embedded in and impact all of education. The Race and Education webinar series is an opportunity for us to kind of provide access to people and organizations committed to improving educational outcomes for those traditionally living on the margins. Significant financial barriers prevent potential educators from entering the profession. The 1 Million Teachers of Color federal policy brief proposed that continued funding of teacher preparation grants, loan cancellation, and other federal loan forgiveness programs is needed. Despite these financial barriers, stakeholders are finding innovative ways to create opportunities, incentives for candidates to enter the field. This webinar will explore those funding options and high retention pathways that some of the folks on this panel have kind of been able to implement and increase the support for diverse educators. So without further ado, I want to introduce our moderator, Dr. Mark Teo, who currently serves as program officer at the Rakes Foundation, but he is a former educator, a history teacher, and administrator who has served in Texas, Pennsylvania, and Boston. And Mark has also served as the vice president for learning, research, and impact at Teach Plus, where he was a champion and advocate for educator voice and including diverse educator perspective in ed policy and continues to this day. So without further ado, Mark, can you take us away?
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to the Hunt Institute for hosting this important panel on the future of the teaching profession with a focus on aspiring educators of color. We are incredibly honored and privileged today to have two distinguished guests who can provide us not only with a field perspective on the opportunities and challenges confronting teaching, but also looking to them for bright spots that they're observing across our schools and institutions, particularly with respect to developing and ensuring a diverse teacher workforce. I'll start by introducing our panel. Roberto J. Rodriguez currently serves as the Assistant Secretary for Policy and Planning at the United States Department of Education, where he leads the development and review of the department's priorities and advises the Secretary on all matters related to policy development, implementation, and review. Prior to his current role, the Assistant Secretary served as President and CEO of Teach Plus, where he built an equity-driven teacher leadership movement that engaged thousands of teachers to shape public policy and institutional practice to deliver greater opportunity for students. Our second speaker today is Dr. Michael J. Sorrell. He is the longest serving president in the 152-year history of Paul Quinn College, which is located in Dallas, Texas. During his 17 years of leadership, Dr. Sorrell and Paul Quinn have become nationally celebrated for the ability to reimagine higher education to better serve the needs of today's students and their communities. Included among Paul Quinn's numerous accomplishments during President Sorrell's tenure are the following: improving graduation rates by more than 30%, reducing the average student loan debt by $30,000, building the first new buildings on campus in 50 years, creating the Urban Work College model, winning the HBCU of the Year, HBCU Student Government Association of the Year, and HBCU Business Program of the Year awards, demolishing 16 campus buildings, partnering with PepsiCo to transform the football fields into the We Over Me farm, and achieving full accreditation from the Transnational Association of Christian Colleges and Schools, or TRACS, and creating the college's first faculty-led student abroad program. And doing all of this while rewriting and leading institutional fundraising records. We are really excited to learn from both of these panelists on what they're doing at the federal and local levels in the area of ensuring a more diverse educator workforce. My first question is to Assistant Secretary Rodriguez. The administration has been reducing barriers for entry for people who are aspiring to become teachers and enter the profession. Can you tell us about some of the creative ways you are building and supporting innovative pathways at the administration?
Yes, Mark. Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be on today's panel, to be with you, Mark, in this conversation, and you, Dr. Sorrell, with your impressive track record of leadership at Paul Quinn College. I just really want to begin by thanking the Hunt Institute and its tremendous leadership in this space as well. You know, the issue that we're talking about today are diverse teachers and building a stronger and thriving diverse teaching workforce. Let me just begin by sharing it's a personal issue for me. It's something that I've really dedicated my career. Both here, I'm honored to be serving in the Biden-Harris administration as Assistant Secretary at the department, but also even beyond that in my time at Teach Plus with you, Mark, and even before then, growing up as the son of public school educators, it wasn't until high school that I had those windows and mirrors in my classroom that every student deserves in their learning, to really see themselves in their teachers, see themselves in what they're being taught and how they're being taught, and see themselves in their future coursework, which we know what a powerful force our teachers are for unlocking and unleashing that future potential for our students. So that's the story for far too many of our young people. You can't be what you can't see. And the research reminds us of what a difference it means to develop and nurture a well-prepared and diverse and talented teaching workforce. It's the single most important resource we can deliver for our young people around their school success. But those personal experiences remind us of what a powerful factor our teachers are in the future trajectory of our students. For our learners of color, it is the difference between higher expectations and engagement and a stronger connection to their curriculum and to who they are in their learning. And our teachers of color can bring that for our students. But for all students, it's also that gift of the social and emotional support, the trusting relationships, the opportunity to learn from one another, to celebrate difference, and to be comfortable in understanding how we navigate difference in our communities and in America. And I can't think of a more important time for our country to be able to do that. So this is why, to your question, Mark, it's been a central pillar in our work here at the Department of Education. We've done more to expand access to high quality and affordable pathways for teacher preparation, including our teacher residency programs, our registered apprenticeship programs, and grow your own programs to really help engage teacher candidates in a learn and earn model with our apprenticeships. We're really excited about that. We've gone from 0 states to 35 states that have now recognized teacher apprenticeships where we can connect with paraprofessionals and other diverse individuals across our communities to think about how we can invite them into the profession in a really important time, and in a way where that we're not saddling our young people with tremendous amounts of debt in exchange for helping them have a ticket to entry into the teaching profession. We are also taking the work that we're doing, what our secretary calls the ABCs of teaching: agency, better working conditions, and compensation, right? We're doing more to help support and focus on the compensation charge, because we know that our teachers on average only earn about 74 cents on every dollar relative to their other college educated peers. So we're trying to do more to call all of our states across the country to action around supporting compensation and making sure that our teachers are paid. We've already seen 30 states that have taken action just over the last couple of years. So we're taking all of those pieces, a real comprehensive approach at supporting our teachers here at the department on the road. We want to take that work to states around the country. I'm so pleased to have the Hunt Institute alongside our U.S. Department of Education in partnership with some of these convenings, including one we just had last week in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and what we will convene later this week in Chicago, and then following that in Mississippi. And we are bringing together 26 states, the District of Columbia, American Samoa, all together to plan more intentionally around the policy changes that we need to make in our system, to lift up the best practices we know around teacher pathways and teacher recruitment and retention, to do more to raise the bar around teacher compensation. And it's going to take us all working together from the federal level as well as our state and local partners to get that work done.
Thank you, Roberto. Dr. Sorrell, I'm going to invite you into this conversation as well. And if you'd like to share a little bit around why this work is so personal to you, and then also address the question around how young people are entering into the profession. As young people are thinking about becoming a pre-service teacher or entering the teacher workforce, what are some of the unexpected barriers and costs of becoming a teacher that you have observed, and how are you addressing that at Paul Quinn? Dr. Sorrell, you're on. There you go.
Thank you for the question. And I want to say to the Hunt Institute, thank you for the invitation. I always enjoy my time being with you all, and I learned so much from the panels and the ability to be with amazing people like Mark and Secretary Rodriguez. And to the Secretary, we value our relationship with the department and with the Secretary, and just have really, really been thrilled with the work that you all have been doing around this issue and more, the other issues that are plaguing education today, and just have really found you all to be an incredibly intentional ally and partner. So just want to give you your flowers while we are all alive, right? But let me say this, for me, education, as one of my aunts like to tell me, was our family business. And so we come out of the lineage of the Great Migration. And when you have people who are rooted in that Southern experience, for many of them, education was the only pathway to a middle-class existence. My grandmother was a teacher. My aunt, who was really her first cousin, was a teacher. My sister has been a teacher in Chicago, inner city Chicago, from the time she graduated from college to this date. She would tell you she's the educator in the family, not her brother. But we, all around us, are people who have been deeply invested and this idea of education as a pathway forward for people who not only look like us, but people who identified with this idea that education will lead you to the fulfillment of the American dream. And so for me, I stand on the shoulders of those individuals. And I look at myself as more of an educational activist. But I so respect and just try to honor the commitment of those who have come before me in this field. Now, to your real question about the barriers that young people might face and how people are thinking about education. I mean, listen, we live in an era where despite the best interest and the best efforts of people like everyone on this call and myself, it's hard to be a teacher, right? It's not the model that existed when my grandmother was a teacher, or even 30 years ago when my sister became a teacher. Today's teachers are a combination of social workers, psychologists, child behavioralists, and then if they're lucky, they get to be teachers. And so the skill set that we're asking of them is extraordinary. And then when you mix that in, and look, I'm just going to touch upon the reality of my situation. I live in Texas. And in Texas, we have this group of individuals that are determined to rewrite American history in a way that excludes the truth of the American experience. And so it's one thing to have grown up your whole life just excited to educate and to want to see that light go on in children's eyes. And then to realize to get to the light switch, you have to deal with the murkiness of politics that have nothing to do with the essence of education and everything to do with just a different set of agendas. And so you marry all of that then with the resource challenges, right? I mean, I think our teachers, especially our K-12 teachers, should all be paid six-figure salaries. I think that's the type of investment that we need to make in our children and our future. And so we have disincentivized many people from what I consider to be, short of medicine, the most important field that people go into. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have people in the Department of Education like we do now who understand the truth of the matter and who are working tirelessly to develop programs which overcome these types of challenges. But it's going to take more than just a 4-year cycle to compensate for this. This is a steady drumbeat. I also think that one other thing that we don't talk about enough, but the Hunt Institute has been really, really at the forefront of through their research, is the paucity of teachers of color in schools all across this country. You can be a student in America and maybe go through your entire K-12 experience and never have a Black educator. Maybe have a Latino educator. So here's what happens when you go your whole life and you don't have people who represent the rest of the country or the rest of the world standing in front of you. You are disadvantaged because you have no idea then how to navigate a world where your supervisor, where your manager, where your CEO will be someone different than that which you were led to believe were your authority figures. And we have to do more than that. I think every school should have multiple teachers of color, not just in urban areas, but in rural areas, in suburban areas. I think that's important, not just for the teachers and their opportunities, but for the well-rounded educational experience of all the students. So it's a really long-winded way of just simply saying this. We have lots of work to do. We are doing it, but we cannot back down or think that we have gotten close to being finished with the job ahead of us.
Thank you, Dr. Sorrell. Both Assistant Secretary Rodriguez and Dr. Sorrell talked about compensation. The flip side of compensation for educators has to do with student debt and student loans. And so Assistant Secretary Rodriguez, I want to turn to that next. We understand that there is considerable evidence underscoring the sizable student debt load that many aspiring educators take on while in college and in preparation, and that this has a particular impact on aspiring educators of color. We'd love to hear your thoughts on how to reduce the cost of attendance and barriers to entry for all students, but particularly thinking about the disproportionate impact on aspiring educators of color and student loans.
There we go. Well, thank you, Mark. This is an important part of the bigger conversation here around how we attract and support growing a new generation of talent into our classrooms for our students. And there is no negating the student loan debt burden and its impact on this challenge. For far too many of our young people, the student loan debt burden that they carry has forced choices around their life trajectory, choices around being able to afford a mortgage, start a family, choices around trading off their education with their future. So we believe we need a better way at large around addressing college affordability and addressing the student loan burden and student loan debt. And that is why we've put forth very ambitious policies to grow the Pell Grant, ambitious policies to provide a better student loan program, ambitious policies to provide grants and assistance specifically to our colleges of education to grow the pipeline. Right, one of the things we've been pushing forward more recently is to provide first ever funding for the Augustus Hawkins program that invests in teacher preparation programs and provides funding for faculty and funding for a more affordable pathways at our historically Black colleges, universities, at our tribally controlled colleges, at our Hispanic serving institutions. These are our institutions that are preparing over half of our nation's teachers of color. But on the student loan front, we know that our Black borrowers, our Latino borrowers, our Asian borrowers disproportionately hold a heavier burden of student loan indebtedness. So there is a disproportionate impact for our communities of color here. And we need to take a clear action to be able to make teaching more possible for those communities. One of the big avenues has been fixing the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This is a program that Congress put into place years ago that incorporates teaching alongside other important public service professions. And this program was broken. This program denied 98.5% of the applicants who came in to try to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. It denied them that forgiveness. Now, there was some intentionality, in the past around administration and implementation of that program. What we are doing now is under our administration's leadership, we are fixing that broken system. We know we only had 7,000 borrowers that were getting relief under public service loan forgiveness. We have flipped that on its head to provide 876,000 individuals relief under that program. That's $63 billion back into the pockets of our families and our individuals who are public servants, including teachers, because our students of color are graduating with more debt than their non-diverse peers, and we have to acknowledge, we have to pull every lever that we can there. Another big lever we're pulling is around the SAVE plan, which is an income-driven repayment plan that we're undertaking for undergraduate borrowers that will cut their payments in half in terms of how they manage that student loan debt. We already have 8 million borrowers enrolled in that plan. Over half of those borrowers will see a monthly payment of $0 under the SAVE plan. So, so we're bringing that alongside the strategy to try to eliminate this teacher tax that I talked about earlier, where our teachers are getting paid 26% less than their college educated peers. And we're trying to do more to address some of the high costs of pursuing a teaching pathway and becoming a teacher. We can't afford those to be barriers to entry into what we know, and I think Dr. Sorrell has so eloquently given light to, is the most noble, should be the most noble profession in our country, right? How are we helping to, it's the best way to lift up our young people and give them the opportunity to succeed. And we need more talent, not less, in our classrooms.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary. Dr. Sorrell, let's continue to talk about innovative approaches. We've just heard some of what the administration is doing to alleviate some of student loan burden. Let's turn to some of the work that Paul Quinn is doing, particularly in making innovative moves around building opportunities, not only for your students, but also for the families that support them, which is really, really interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been able to do and how you were able to bring those opportunities to the students and the families that you serve?
Absolutely. So at Paul Quinn College, all of our innovation begins with conversations with our students. And we have a very pragmatic and open and honest approach. And it starts with simply asking them, what do you need? Tell us about your day-to-day life. Tell us about your family. I mean, and let me say this begins in our summer bridge program, which, will be kicking off here in a few weeks, where our incoming students every day interact with the leaders of the college. I am their first professor. I teach a class. I am with them 2 hours a day, 4 days a week for 6 weeks. And when you are their teacher, when you are their professor, you engage differently. You get to see what they are like on a day-to-day basis, when they are happy, when they are sad, what's bothering them, their journals, which I read every journal entry, which, that's a whole nother story because I'm exhausted by the end of it, but I digress. But it gives you a window into their world. And once you understand that, then you trust them. And when you trust them, you can have honest conversations with them. And so with our students, the number one factor which was impacting their lives was scarcity. It was poverty. We were charging less than half of what the average private institution in our country was charging. But our students said, we still don't have it, right? 75% or so of our students are Pell Grant students. 96% of them have extreme financial need. And so they just didn't have the money. So here's the thing. You can either create systems where your students spend a bunch of time hearing about how poor they are and how things have been made. We've made exceptions for you so you can fit in here, or you can design institutions where they actually are the center point for all of the work. So this isn't about we've adopted for you. This is we made this for you. And so when you do that and you understand it, then you realize, listen, I went to amazing liberal arts colleges who talked nonstop about lifelong learning. I love lifelong learning. You can see this is my home library. There are books everywhere. Clearly, I have drank all the Kool-Aid on lifelong learning. But you know what really is cool? Lifelong earning, right? So giving people pathways to lift themselves out of poverty without reminding them that they grew up in poverty. So we created a system called the Urban Work College. It's very simple. You come to Paul Quinn, you get a job, right? It's literally that simple. You come to Paul Quinn, we go get you an internship. After the first year, when you are in the training program, those internships pay you either $13,000 a school year or $18,000 a school year. $13,000 is if you want to be in a nonprofit internship. $18,000 if you're in a for-profit internship. Sometimes people say, "Oh, that's not fair." Well, look, my best friend is an investment banker. He makes millions of dollars a year. I'm not an investment banker. I don't make millions of dollars a year. I do fine, but I made an educated choice. People need to understand what their choices lead to. So We find the jobs for the students. This coupled with the fact that we only charge around $22,000, $23,000 a year, room, board, tuition fees, everything. So when you take the $18,000, when you take the roughly $8,000 for the Pell Grant, that's $26,000. That means for your last 3 years of college, if you so choose, you don't have to borrow any money, right? And you're getting money back. Now, you absolutely may have to borrow some money your first year, but that we consider that the cost of doing business. You can graduate with less than $10,000 of student loan debt. The internships give you a competitive advantage in the marketplace because instead of regular work study jobs, and look, no knock on work study jobs, I loved my job manning the gym on Sundays from 12 to 6 at Oberlin College. It was a wonderful job. I got lots of studying and shots up, and maybe, just maybe once or twice, some naps in as well. So I get it, all right? But if you have an opportunity to go intern at JP Morgan Chase or Wells Fargo or one of the elite private schools in this area or one of the city government opportunities, that's better. That's better. And for our students who are coming from places where they have a deficit of relationship capital, how about we stand in the gap and lend them some of our relationship capital? Now, we also recognize that lifting one person out of poverty isn't going to cut it. Our institutional mantra is we over me. The needs of a community supersede the wants of an individual. Higher education is the only place where they expect people of limited economic means to be superheroes. We ask one person to get to college, first generation college student, and then miraculously lift everyone in their family out of poverty. Right? Come on. I mean, even Thor needed the rest of the Avengers to beat Thanos. All right. So how about we give our students some help? So we created something called the Village Program. It's very simple. If you're a Pell Grant student that's admitted to Paul Quinn College and you've a 3.0 or better, you get to bring you get to bring two of your friends or family members to college with you. All right. If they have whatever level of academic preparation that they have, we have a program which can onboard them in the appropriate place. If they are people who have not had an opportunity to finish their high school degree, they can come into PQCX, which is our adult education program. It's a certificate program, right? It's 6 weeks, minimal cost, get in, get out, improve your economic outcome immediately. If they are qualified on a different level, but they also have some financial challenges, they can go to our online program. Or if they're prepared and they have the capacity, they can come to our regular full-time program. So this allows us to engage people on a very, very different level and say to folks, now you aren't expected to save everyone. If somebody really figured it out, they could bring themselves, 2 more people. Those 2 people could bring 2 more people. Those 4 people could bring 2 more. All of a sudden, you've lifted everyone out through the application of this program. So we're excited about it. It's in its early stages, but we have absolutely no doubt it's going to be enormously successful.
Thank you, Dr. Sorrell. I'm going to have a follow-up question for you on that. Before I ask that, though, I do want to encourage the audience to put any questions they have for our panel in the Q&A chat box. We'll turn to some Q&A from the audience in a moment after a few more questions. But Dr. Sorrell, I'd like to follow up with, could you share some stories of impact of the programs and policies that you've highlighted, something you'd like to elevate for us?
I mean, there's a lot. It's been pretty cool. So let's start with one of my favorite stories. It was a young man who attended a high school in Brooklyn. Brooklyn Poly was the name of it. So it was an amazing, innovative model. And I was at the school interviewing the students who were applying. And the administration brought us some extraordinary students. I mean, candidly, some of the best alums that we have who have graduated in the last 10, 12 years have come from this school. they brought us a young man who was incredibly shy, couldn't really look me in the eye. Grades were, a bit below where we would normally like to see them. But there was something genuine in his soul. So we admitted him. He came to the summer bridge program. He turns in his first paper, didn't have access to a computer because the computer center wasn't open. We didn't have enough. So I told him they could write the papers. He turns in a paper that once you looked at it, you realized this young man had extreme dyslexia. And that hadn't really been captured or represented to us. So this is part of the reason why he was struggling and why he was reticent to really embrace the college opportunity. He didn't think he could make it. So he goes through the program at Summer Bridge, and we realize, oh, there's nothing wrong with your intellect. We just have to help you manage the dyslexia. So I'm in New York after Summer Bridge is over, and I call him up. I'm like, hey, my wife and I are here. Are you doing anything? Can we take you to dinner? He says, well, it's my niece's quinceanera. You guys are welcome to come by. So, I'm thinking it's going to be a small deal. There were so many people there, right? And I don't speak Spanish. My wife does. And depending upon how long she has been in the sun, oftentimes when we are traveling, people assume that she's a Latina. Well, she's in there, and literally there were 100 people at this party. And the whole family sits down and starts grilling me about whether or not the young man can be successful in college because they're concerned, they're not sold. Long story short, he graduates in 4 years. We hire him at the college. He does an extraordinary job. He eventually is promoted to be the guy who runs our buildings and grounds operations. He left us to take a job with another company, which, by the way, was exactly the right thing to do. It was an incredible opportunity. He's married now. And to watch, when he graduated, we named the Student Service Award after him. And he went through the work program. He took advantage of these opportunities. He engaged. There's so many other ones I could talk about. Our first alum who's at the Wharton School of Business getting his MBA. First time we've had any, Paul Quinn alum go to an Ivy League business school, only the second to go to an Ivy League graduate program at all. The point of this story is simply this. There are lots of models in higher education. We think the ones that allow you to engage with your students on a personal level and know their stories and take the time to go to their homes, walk the streets of their communities, understand them, allow you to transform the relationship between themselves and higher education differently. I know that can't happen at schools of 50,000 people, but everyone doesn't need to go to a school of 50,000 students, right? There's something magical about the small college experience. As someone who's been able to attend all types of schools, I will tell you, I wouldn't trade my small college experience for anything.
Thank you, Dr. Sorrell. Assistant Secretary Rodriguez, the president reminds us here about the value of a college education, but we also recognize that right now that the value of a traditional college education is in question. I'd love to hear from you, like, how is the administration working to ensure that the narrative around the need for a high quality, diverse educator workforce is also tied to the story around the value of going to and pursuing higher education?
Well, the conversation that we are having together here this afternoon is the testament to the power of education in lives, right? It is about the lives. It's about lives and learning and upward mobility for individuals like the one that Dr. Sorrell the young man Dr. Sorrell just spoke about, whose lives can be transformed with great educators and with institutions that create the space for their learning and their growth, that see them for who they are, value and uplift them, and invest in their future. This is my story. It's why I work in education, right? Because as the son of public school educators and as the son of immigrants, both of my parents were the first in their family to graduate high school, let alone go on to college. And when I came from a hardworking family, like many immigrant stories in our country, where my family taught me the value of tenacity, of hard work, of dedication, but also of caring and lifting others in the work that you do in your pursuit. And so, that's the power that education holds, right? For my mother going to a small college, she was working in the cafeteria. She wasn't going to college, and it was by the grace of one dean who saw her bussing tables and decided to have a conversation about her and her future, which was not on a college path, because her college counselor told her, well, after you graduate from high school, there's not a place for a young woman of color in this community in college, right? So I just mentioned that because the trajectory of our educators change lives. They change the trajectory of lives and of communities. And we've already been talking all around the big notion here, which is that education is the single most important rung on the ladder into the middle class, on the ladder into upward mobility, into that earning alongside learning. Right. So, and you can't dispute that, right? We know that 70% of jobs today require some type of post-secondary education or credential. And that's only going to grow. Some estimates have that at upwards of 90% moving forward. We have an economy that's being transformed in the here and now by huge investments like the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. These investments happening right now and over the last 3 years that the president's really put forth are creating a new clean energy economy. They're creating a new digital economy. They're creating a new innovation economy. And that economy is going to require post-secondary education. It is not just a prerequisite for some. It is a necessity, right? Some level of education beyond our K-12 system, beyond that high school diploma. So that's why we're feeling so urgent about this work. And we know that our educators are at the heart of that endeavor. They're at the heart of unlocking and unleashing that light for learning and that love of learning in our youngest learners. They're at the heart of that endeavor of creating a more equitable public education system for all kids. They're at the heart of that endeavor of creating a higher education system that throws the doors of opportunity open, not just for some, but for all, and doesn't just open those doors, but walks our young people through those halls and helps them earn that degree or earn that credential that they know that they're going to need to succeed in the future. It's a necessity for all of our students, right? And I think the best way we can invest in that is by creating more of those windows and mirrors in the lives and in the learning of our young people, creating those opportunities for our young people to see themselves in their future, to have that mentorship, to have that connection, educator that cares for them and connects with them early, those opportunities to build that social capital that they need for their future. And that is, right now, for too many of our young people, still a precondition of the zip code in which they grow up. But that social capital is something that all of our young people need to be able to be successful. Those internships, those networks and those relationships with others that are helping them discover who they are and the path that they can take into their future.
Thank you, Assistant
Hey,
Secretary.
Mark,
Yes,
can I
sir.
just piggyback one thing that the secretary said that I feel like we have to highlight. His mother was saved from a life where her gifts would have been underserved by an engaged educator. But she was set upon a path where she was going to be poorly served with respect to her gifts by a college counselor who didn't see her potential. That is a common story for far too many students of color. Our students are in schools where, and let me be very clear, I know the data. I know that many of our college counselors are overworked, that their caseloads are too large, but I cannot give a complete pass because far too many of them are not seeing our students for who they truly are and can be, and are making recommendations to them that serve them very, very poorly. And I love the programs that are out here addressing that issue, but I worry and I am saddened by the idea of how many parents, how many students didn't catch the lucky break that the secretary's mother caught. That is one of the things, while we are working with teachers, we also need to be working on this college counselors area as well. I know this was not on the agenda, so I'm going to be quiet, but like the spirit moved me, as they say in church. And I just want to put that on the Hunt Institute's to-do list. All right. But I'll go back now and just go on mute, but thank you.
I'll second that too. Again, right, these life trajectories are transformed by the adults and the educators and the college counselors and the others that we mentors that we put around our young people. So let's surround them with folks that are going to believe and uplift them and elevate them into those positions to be able to be successful.
Well, that's fantastic. Why don't we turn now to the advice portion of our webinar? And Dr. Sorrell, just want to go back to you on this one. So what advice, as an award-winning HBCU president, what advice do you have for your higher education institution peers out in the field? What advice do you have for them when you think about your experience at Paul Quinn on how they can prepare their young people for entering into the workforce? You've talked about guidance counselors to some degree. What other items are on your advice list at this point?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that we have to communicate to our students the inevitability of their success. Far too often, we leave our students believing that they may or may not make it. They may or may not succeed, which then leaves them ill-equipped to recognize the difference between a stumble and a fall, right? What I believe in telling my students is beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're going to be successful because you're going to work hard enough to be successful. That does not mean that there won't be moments where you fall short. Those are moments. Those are not your lifetime. The magnitude, the direction of your life is going upward. The trajectory is an upward trajectory. Never forget that. The other thing that I think is incredibly important to tell our peers is to stop falling in love with their traditions and to fall in love with their students, right? To understand that I think it's great that all these schools have been around for hundreds of years and they've done all this stuff and their buildings look like museums. I think that's all great, right? But we live in a time where the pace of change is unlike anything we've ever seen. No problem is solved permanently. Everything needs to be on a 3-year review cycle to make sure that what you did yesterday will work 2 days from now. And so I fundamentally believe that we have to continue to challenge the answers that we have found, and that we have to be open to change, that we have to be open to all the voices. People ask me about shared governance. I believe in shared governance. I just think the parents of the students should have a role in the governance as well, right? This isn't just the faculty. I think that's great. I think they should absolutely have a say so. But are we really not going to give the parents and the students a voice in this process? And then the last thing that my advice is to stop backing down from political engagement, right? Backing down from political engagement is why our schools are underfunded now, right? We have ceded the conversation to a version of politics that doesn't serve us well. So we haven't spoken up. So the amount of investment in higher education has decreased significantly over the last 20 years. You want to know why college is so expensive? It's because we've cut off one of the primary sources of funding to help hold down the costs to the students. So political engagement, invest in the confidence level of the students, and then appreciate the fact that no problem is ever permanently solved, and you have to stay in a constant movement forward on how you address the issues of the day.
Thank you, Dr. Sorrell. And staying in the advice portion of our discussion, we had a question from one of our participants. Assistant Secretary Rodriguez, I'm going to hand this one off to you. What advice do you have for state government leaders with what they could be doing better to promote more young people of color to become teachers and stay in the teaching profession? What advice do you have for state leaders in this area?
Well, I think we have to double down on what we're prioritizing and how we're defining success here, right? The states that we've seen move further, faster in addressing this work around building a diverse and talented future ed workforce are the states that have more intentionally measured and collected the data around where we are and where we need to go, have been intentional about setting the goals for where we need to go, and then have brought folks together and galvanized action around that work, right? Have said that, if we're going to build new pathways into teaching and into education, we need to start by having conversations with young people and with future educators about their lived experience and how to bring them and engage them and bring them forward. We have to start by not siloing ourselves into higher education and K-12 education but actually bringing everyone together around the shared stake that we all have in creating an infrastructure and a system that is going to look different and work differently than it does today, right? And so there's some of that is about setting in place the policies to, support new residencies and new grow your own models and to support new pathways into apprenticeship. Some of that is about, our governors and our state legislators setting goals and measuring progress toward those goals. I was with Governor Cooper just in North Carolina, who through the Drive Task Force has done a tremendous, I think, a great model of establishing a national or a state level proclamation and building a commission and bringing people together around that effort. He's got his college presidents alongside, system leaders and superintendents and others all rowing in the same direction. But make no mistake, like we can't get there without involving the voices and the vision of the folks that are in our system and who we're trying to reach, our communities, our young people, their families. And we also can't get there without one of the other thing that Dr. Sorrell mentioned, which is, openness and a zeal for innovation and for new ideas, for new ways to change the pathways into the profession. Because God only knows what we've been doing to date has not yielded what we need for the future relative to our public education system. We were down 900,000 fewer teacher candidates just in the 10 years leading up to the profession. We still have a teacher shortage. Our recovery and rescue dollars have helped bring back local public education jobs. But we still have a teacher shortage around this country, over 130,000 teachers, right? And so we have to do more to try new things, open new playbooks, be open to new ideas and new ways of approaching this challenge. And it's sometimes hard for our system leaders, our policy leaders, our institutional leaders to deviate from the norm, but we have to be willing to take that risk and make that jump together with the clear intentionality of what we're doing in terms of the goal of building a stronger workforce, building a better and more diverse workforce.
Thank you. We have just 5 minutes left, so I'm going to leave you both with one final question, and really want to leave it on an upbeat note for a moment. In a minute or two, could you share with us what leaves you inspired and optimistic about education? And what would you say to those prospective educators who are weighing career options, or those prospective young people who are thinking about entering into the field? What advice do you have for them? So what leaves you inspired and optimistic? And what words would you want to share with prospective educators who are considering joining the profession?
You know, this is an easy one for me, Mark. What inspires me are our young people. Our students are what inspire me. It is their aspirations, their vision, their hopes for their future. And what we work toward to that end is to, and what we all need to be working toward, I believe, is to create a system that is worthy of their aspirations, a system that is will deliver on the potential of every learner to succeed and reach their goals, to reach their dreams. You know, we have to, I think, create the structures, the equity within the system. We have to be more intentional about the investments in the system. Our budgets are reflections of our priorities. So we have to put our money where our mouth is there. But it's all in the service of our learners. And when you're out there, whether it is talking to a college student, whether it is visiting a pre-K classroom, or visiting a new career-connected high school, the vision of our learners and their families for their success, I think, is unmatched. My words to future educators, education is a dynamic and exciting profession. It is also our most noble calling. You know, we don't always send that message to our educators as intentionally as we should. When you go to Singapore and you travel around the system and you talk to folks, they all recognize that educators are what they call their nation builders. They are the ones that are building the future of their country. So it's so much the case here too. Both our nation builders and our protectors of our democracy. Right. So, you know, it is still the most noble profession. I think there's a lot of excitement and opportunity to lead and to contribute to a dynamism that is growing in education. Like, our classrooms don't have to look the same way that they have for the last decade and generations from past. And I would invite all of our young people to consider education and consider teaching as an opportunity to remake and reshape what learning, what our country looks like for its future.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Dr. Sorrell.
sure. I would say what inspires me is commencement. When you attend our commencement, you see Quinites of all colors, all ages, all socioeconomic backgrounds. And years ago, we stopped requiring tickets for commencement because we never wanted to be the people to turn folks away who wanted to be there to celebrate that day. And when you show up at our commencement activities and you meet the families and the hugs they give you and how appreciative they are, that's all the inspiration that you should ever need, right? Like, it is just heartwarming. For my words of advice to future educators, I would just say get in the fight, right? Like, don't pick education because the summers are off. Pick education because you're inspired for the fight, that you want to teach people to be the better angels of themselves, and you want them to inhabit a world that represents the very best possibilities that all of us can achieve. Pick an issue that you care about more than anything else and work towards that. For me, I hate poverty. I don't think poverty should exist. I'm an educator because I want to eradicate poverty. Find your issue, find your passion, and let it rip.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sorrell. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Rodriguez. You've heard both of our panelists talk about the need for hearing directly from educators. And so in the chat box, I've put 2 reports that might be of interest to you. The first is from Educators for Excellence and their most recent report directly from classroom teachers. And the second is a report from the Center for Black Educator Development and Teach Plus, where they heard directly from high school students who are interested in becoming teachers and their perspectives on changing their profession, which really speaks to what Dr. Sorrell and Assistant Secretary Rodriguez talked about today. Thank you to the Hunt Institute for hosting this panel, for giving us the opportunity to talk and delve into these issues with these 2 esteemed panelists. And the Hunt Institute will be in touch with all participants today with additional resources and links to some of the things that you heard about. To Dr. Sorrell, thank you for your leadership and your work. To Assistant Secretary Rodriguez, thank you for the work you're doing in the administration. And to everyone else, have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.